China 54%, European Union 20%, Japan 24%. But then there are smaller countries like Vietnam 46%, Indonesia 32%. Listening to the economists, those it's really a little bit apples and oranges to ask a country like Vietnam or a smaller country
Right.
to do the kind of trade or buy the kind of amount of goods that the US would buy, which is a big country with a lot of disposable income and a lot of consumers that are spending their disposable income. So it's really kind of apples and oranges to ask every country this kind of transactional, I'm going to do to you what you did to me kind of thing is, you know, what you should have done. And look, even some of the greatest economists, they talk about, okay, you want a bigger trade imbalance. It's just like the whole thing with some of the other things that President Trump did with with the federal government and all of the workers that they fired.
Yeah.
Listen, the ideas make strategic, as they say, sense. They're not complete. They're not completely divorced from reality, but take some time, study it, and do it the right way. And this is like the
Yeah.
biggest problem we keep talking about with President Trump.
Uh,
Even if some of the ideas aren't completely ridiculous and may in fact help America, the execution is just ass backwards.
well, and I talked to Mallory McMorrow yesterday. She's running for
Yeah.
the U.S. Senate in Michigan, and from a strategic precision standpoint, tariffs can work. Presidents have used tariffs from both parties over the years. It's happened, but when you're talking about whether or not Trump is tethered to reality, the chart that Trump was showing in the Rose Garden yesterday was not tethered to reality. Economist Paul
Right.
Krugman took to Substack to take a look at Trump's numbers and found, quote, he's gone full on crazy. This is according to Paul Krugman, respected economist. He said, focus on the European Union in his Substack post. The EU, like the United States, has generally low tariffs. The average tariff it charges on goods is less than 3%. Trump had a crazy number up on his chart yesterday that said 39% is what the EU charges in terms of tariffs. Paul Krugman goes, where does this 39% number come from? He says, I have no idea. Many people have speculated that Trump would count value-added taxes as tariffs, even though they aren't. European producers selling to the EU market pay the same VAT as U.S. producers, so it doesn't discriminate and therefore isn't protectionist. But even if you get that wrong, EU VAT rates are in the vicinity of 20%, so you still can't get anywhere close to 39%. So Krugman's pointing out that a lot of the numbers that Trump had up on that chart yesterday were just gobbledygook. They were just they
Yeah.
weren't they
Yeah.
weren't accurate. And so this is
But
the problem with Trump, is that he is often making these kinds of decisions based on just stuff he's pulling out of thin air. And he's been hell bent on this tariff policy for the better part of 3 decades. He's been talking about this since the late 90s, Elise.
yeah, two things here. First of all, he has this theory of the case, and that if you have these tariffs, Americans are not going to buy foreign goods anymore. They're going to come to the U.S. and they're going to buy American goods. But we don't have the capacity and the industrial base for them to do that yet. So we can't blame Americans if they want to spend more money on foreign goods. Maybe they will spend more money on foreign goods. There's not that much evidence to suggest that more expensively things made here actually will return jobs, and
Yeah.
it's just like the case of it is wrong. And then the other thing is, and we could talk about this a little bit, this tariffs are, the headlines today. They're the shiny object. But this is just the beginning. A lot of
Yeah.
economists are following very closely something Trump wants to do. And one of his advisors that wrote something called the Mar-a-Lago Accord. And it's all about lowering the value of the dollar, currency manipulation, to lower the value of the dollar. They think that that is going to try to bring the surplus down. And that's going to have more of a global effect worldwide. And when Trump says we're done with this economic surrender, basically what he's saying is, U.S. economic leadership has carried the world. We're not going to do it
Yeah.
anymore. We're going to come back, to us. And the truth of the matter is, this is just the economical equivalent of what he's doing with, blowing up the global world order, blowing up
Yeah.
everything, this nationalist agenda. And he's doing it again on the Americans. So it's a piece of the whole pie. But the tariffs, I'm
Yeah.
sorry to say, are just the beginning here.